Good morning, class. From our paper of Understanding English Poetry, BA first year, Optional English, paper second, Understanding English Poetry, we'll now discuss the first element, the first unit number 1, that is the elements of poetry. So, elements, we know the meaning of the word elements. Elements means the constituent parts. The elements of poetry. What are the essential elements of poetry that we are going to deal with here? For this purpose, we'll start with what is poetry. We'll ask the question, what is poetry? As we have many times known that poetry is what we love from our childhood days. Maybe in the different forms like songs, the songs which are sung for us by our grandparents, by our parents, in the form of lullaby. The starting is in the form of lullaby, and as we grow further on different occasions, we are habitual of listening to the poetry on different occasions. These people, they used to sing these songs. The grandparents, the parents, they used to sing the songs for us, or either they recite these poems for us. So what is poetry then? Poetry is in this sense an ancient form of oral or literary expression. It is orally communicated from generation to generation, and sometimes it is expressed in the form of a written document also. It is the literary expression in this fashion. One renowned English poet, renowned English romantic poet S.T. Coleridge describes poetry by comparing it with the prose. Prose, according to S.T. Coleridge, is words in their best order. The words in their best order. That is the definition of prose, according to S.T. Coleridge. And how he describes then poetry? Poetry is the best words in the best order. Both is best. The best words and the order also should be the best. Whereas in prose, the words, we don't know whether they are best always or not, but the order is best. But in poetry, what is essential? The best words in the best order. Then how the different poets from ancient times have defined poetry. The poets and critics from ancient times, they also have their own definitions of poetry. Now let us discuss these definitions of poetry as they are elaborated, they are propounded by the poets and critics from different ancient times. We start here with Plato, the first important literary figure of poetry and criticism. And according to Plato, poetry is an imitation of an action twice removed from reality. What is poetry? Poetry is an imitation of an action twice removed from reality. Imitation. Imitation means to copy something, to imitate something, to do the thing or the action exactly in the manner in which you see it. That is imitation. And we are the masters of imitation right from our childhood, right? So poetry is an imitation of an imitation. Imitation of an imitation, and hence it is twice removed from reality. That is the definition by Plato. The next important Greek poet and critic, Aristotle, the next important philosopher, Aristotle, how he defines poetry? He defines poetry as an action of imitation. In the same tradition of Plato, he defines poetry as an action of imitation, but this imitation is not the imitation of the objects of nature. Then what kind of imitation it is? It is the imitation of something very ideal and noble. It is the imitation of something far more ideal and noble. That is, Aristotle's definition of poetry states that poetry is an imitation of something ideal and noble. Okay. Now, after these ancient poets and critics, let us move on towards the Elizabethan poets. How the Elizabethan poets describe poetry. What are their views regarding the definition of poetry? The foremost important poet of the Elizabethan age, Sir Philip Sidney, equally important critic, Sir Philip Sidney, in his defense of poetry is the name of the work written by Philip Sidney in the defense of poetry. In his defense of poetry, he adores poetry. Adores? He says that poetry is very good. Poetry, adoring means stating the good qualities. Liking something for the good attributes, that is adoring. He adores poetry, and he says that poetry is an art of imitation. Poetry is an art of imitation, representing, counterfeiting, or figuring forth a speaking picture with the end to teach and delight. According to Sir Philip Sidney, there are two ends of teaching poetry. Ends, aims. The first end or aim is to teach, and the second end or aim of poetry is to delight, means to make the people happy. To give delight, to impart delight means to make the people happy. So the first aim is to teach, to impart knowledge, and the second aim is to delight, means to make the people happy. That was the definition of poetry by Sir Philip Sidney. As we move move a little bit further, we come towards the Romantic age of poetry. And during this Romantic age of poetry, how different poets have described poetry. We start with the important name of the Romantic tradition, that is William Wordsworth. William Wordsworth, who is held greatly as the founder of the Romantic tradition. How he describes poetry, how he states poetry. In his work, Preface to the Lyrical Ballads, he states poetry as the spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings originating from emotions recollected in tranquility. The spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings. What kind of feelings these are? These are powerful feelings. And that is the spontaneous overflow, spontaneous continuous overflow. When something is we know what is overflow actually. Means crossing the limits, right? Spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings, and how these feelings are coming into existence, how they have came into existence. They came into existence from the emotions recollected in tranquility. These emotions are the emotions recollected in tranquility. Tranquility means the happy, the contented state of mind. And when we are in a happy, contented state of mind, we are tempted to recollect the emotions. And these emotions recollected in tranquility are the emotions which are held by William Wordsworth as the emotions for the creation, responsible for the creation of a poem. And the spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings originating from emotions recollected in tranquility is what is poetry according to William Wordsworth. The next equally important romantic poet, P.B. Shelley, in his defense of poetry, what he states regarding the definition of poetry: the record of the best and happiest moments of the happiest and best mind. Everything is best. In P.B. Shelley, everything is best. It is the record. You know the meaning of the word record. A record is something that you document, a record of the best and happiest moments. The best moments and happiest moments. The best and happiest moments of the happiest and best mind. The mind expressing these moments is also in the happiest state. This is the definition of poetry according to P.B. Shelley. As we travel further in the realm of poetry, we come towards the Victorian age. And in the Victorian age, the renowned Victorian poet Matthew Arnold states poetry as poetry is a criticism of life. Poetry is a criticism of life under the circumstances laid down for such criticism by the laws of poetic truth and beauty. The laws for this criticism are the laws of poetic truth and beauty, and under these circumstances, what kind of criticism is possible? That is the poetry. According to him, poetry is simply